I have three major passions in life. One is YouTube. I've been using this platform since high school. It became my primary source for entertainment, and then later on it became my job. The second one is One Piece. I love me some fictional pirates, so much so that I have an entire channel dedicated to talking about them. The third one, however, is a passion that I almost never talk about because I honestly don't think a single person in the world cares, but that passion is marketing, which is different from advertising. Marketing is more the study of how to best serve a consumer, whereas advertising is how to best make people buy your stuff. But as a result, I'm always fascinated by the marketing activities of others on YouTube, and there is a particular channel in my niche named Mr. Morj who has done something that I would describe as terrifyingly remarkable, because he has essentially, and I think unintentionally, started a One Piece cult. And I mean that in the most literal sense of the word. I don't mean to use it as slander or any kind of pejorative. I mean it in the strict technical sense of the word, because a cult is a social group that is defined by its common interest in a particular personality, object, or goal. So a cult really is just a group of people with a clear common interest. You don't need to be a religious nut to be in a cult. In fact, everyone watching this video is probably part of a cult in some way, shape, or form. And from a marketing perspective, I find it fascinating. And to be clear, this video is not an attack. I like Morj, he's a cool guy. And it's also not a debunking of his theory in question. It's just an examination of a social phenomena that I have never seen before in this niche, and I think it's well worth recording. But how has Mr. Morj done this? How has he achieved this cult-like status? Well, to understand that, here's a bit about One Piece. It's a story about young pirates traveling to achieve their dreams. Enemies then stand in the way of those dreams. Said enemies get punched or sliced or kicked. And we've been doing that for almost 25 years now. It has an incredibly rich history and even more anticipated future, which is why one of the most popular video formats for it on YouTube are theories. And as these theories become popular, they gain followings, believers, if you will. And at times the fan base can fragment into those who strongly believe one idea versus those who strongly believe an opposing idea. And there is no greater example of this than a video posted on the 5th of April 2019 entitled "Why the Fire Festival Will End in Failure." And I really don't think anyone could have predicted what would come of this. I'm not here to argue the theory itself. I have a whole other channel for talking about the dynamics of fictional pirates. But to get very briefly into it, the story we're currently in is an arc called Wano. The purpose of Wano is to stealthily invade an island, raise a rebellion, and defeat an emperor of the sea known as Kaido during a raid on his private island. And Morj's theory hypothesized that this raid would fail. The alliance would have to retreat and the true conflict would come afterwards in some form. Fairly innocent enough. And I should say that right now we're almost in 2022 and we still do not have a conclusion to this event. We're currently experiencing the raid play out right in front of our eye things, and it's been a long few years. But back in 2019, this was a well-argued theory. One of Morj's greatest strengths as a creator is being able to take any idea, no matter how absurd, and come up with a decent argument for why it isn't absurd. And Morj does this primarily through meta-analysis of storytelling as a whole, often performing deep dives into the author of One Piece's writing style, patterns, intentions, etc. And from a marketing perspective, this is amazing, because it means you can construct all sorts of outrageously interesting titles to make people click your videos, but also have some substance to back them up, because a talented debater can argue anything, and that's what Morj is. He is very talented. But in general, this particular theory became known as the raid will fail. And I hope you like those words, because we're probably going to be saying them a lot. In fact, if you're in any way active in the One Piece YouTube or Reddit sphere, you'll have now been hearing them for probably about 3 years straight. And this is probably a good time to talk about branding. There's a book I love called Primal Branding, which goes over a series of 7 factors to building a successful brand, which are a creation story, creed, icons, rituals, language, non-believers, and of course, a leader. If you do all or even most of those things, then you've got a solid brand. And keep all of those things in mind as we go forward, because the raid will fail isn't just a theory, not anymore. Because this idea took root, and due to the extraordinary length of the Wano arc, the theory has been allowed to germinate in ways that no others have. Because most theories either quickly get proven or disproven, but not this one. So many fans were enamored by this well-argued idea, so much so that it became a staple of the Morj fanbase lexicon. As time went on, a new chapter wasn't so much about what was happening in One Piece, so much as it was either trying to confirm or debunk the raid theory, and Morj played into this quite heavily. There's actually a brilliant video on YouTube that illustrates exactly how much. It's called Mr. Morj saying the raid will fail for 3 years straight, brackets, short version, because apparently there is a much longer version coming, where this user has allegedly taken every instance of Morj saying or arguing why the raid will fail from over 79 different videos. Now, to put that number into some perspective, the main Morj channel has just under 200 videos at the time of writing this, and his stream channel, Mr. Morj 2, has 39. So across his entire body of work in the One Piece realm, which is about 240 videos, roughly every 1 in 3 of those videos contains a statement or the implied belief that the raid will fail. And that is is absolutely wild. At this point, it's no longer an idea or a theory because it's not just confined to a video or two exploring that idea. This has become a full-on doctrine, almost a way of life, because chances are you cannot go more than 3 Morj videos without hearing this statement, in the same way that you can't go to a Christian church without hearing about Jesus dying for your sins and stuff.
There is absolutely no chance that the Fire Festival ends in success.
That I believe the raid will end in failure.
The raid is going to end in failure because
I obviously believe the raid will fail.
is the raid fail?
The raid has to fail.
The raid will fail. The raid will fail. The raid's gonna fail.
If the raid fails,
The raid will fail.
the raid will fail.
One failure into the next failure into the next failure.
If only the one org could fail at the rate that my streams fail.
Which is why the Morj brand has become synonymous with the raid failing, to the point where even if he is a guest on other channels, the raid failing theory will be brought up because that is the brand. So let's get back to primal branding for a bit and see what we have. Immediately, we can tick the leader box, because Morj has become something of a One Piece theory prophet. He has followers who believe his predictions, but even more than that, with followers comes non-believers. This theory is so polarizing that Morj immediately ticks another box, because when it comes to brand loyalty, one of the most important aspects is to have an alternative force to stand against. You know, the classic example would be Coke versus Pepsi, or McDonald's versus KFC, Nintendo versus PlayStation, Canon versus Nikon, Nike versus Adidas, and so on and so forth. Pretty much every major brand will have a brand enemy, and that instills a sense of belonging in the consumer. Like, imagine someone saying, like, I am a Nintendo fan. That is my identity, that is who I am, and you PlayStation plebs can just F the crap off. And of course you can replace Nintendo and PlayStation with each other, or, you know, whatever brands you want. It doesn't matter. We've all seen those people, and to varying degrees, we all are those people. So what Morj rather brilliantly did was create an opposing faction of non-believers. Those people who did not agree with the theory, which only made those who did bind together and develop a sense of community. And candid story time now, I even tried to play into this at one point, because every now and then I would drop into a Morj video, leave a snarky comment, like say, I don't know, this raid sure looks like it's gonna succeed, because I wanted to encourage that rivalry. Like, I could be the villain for his audience and he could be the villain for mine, and we could mutually benefit over fictional pirate beef. However, I have calmed down on that a bit, because I've since come to a fairly startling conclusion, which is that I think Morj actually very strongly believes in his own doctrine. It's not what I rather cynically thought of as a brilliant marketing ploy. It's more like a legitimate idea that has just spiraled out of control, and this becomes apparent in a couple of live streams where he gets, I'm gonna say, a bit heated about the integrity of the idea, as well as a few public Twitter conversations I've had with him. So I've taken a big step back from that because I don't want to legitimately antagonize him. That aside, Morj ticks so many more boxes. Language, the raid will fail. Those English words are now synonymous with Morj. He has his own lexicon, and those words together also double as the creed. Then we have rituals. It's become a ritual to say that the raid will fail or argue in its favor, so much so that it happens again 1 in every 3 videos. People tune into these videos hoping to see the continuation of that story. And as for icons, the conflict of the raid itself is now an icon of the Morj brand. And finally, the story, and this is very important. Morj has the story of being the underdog theorist, going against the grain with a wild yet well-argued idea. And with that, you've literally taken all 7 factors of primal branding and successfully implemented them. Whether that was his intention or not, the raid will fail is now his brand. And that comes with its strengths and weaknesses. What it has going for it is that it's created an incredibly loyal viewer base for Morj, a base of like-minded individuals who feel like they are the underdogs in this grand theory war, and who believe not just in the theory, but in the future sight of their leader Morj. And I think that's quite perfect, because again, the definition of a cult is a social group that is defined by its common interest in a particular personality, object, or goal. And the raid will fail at this stage is 100% a technical cult, because it's a social group who are invested in the common interest of the personality of Morj, and of course the goal of the raid failing. And I find it truly fascinating, because I don't think there's anything else like it in my niche. Theories and personalities, they come and go, but nothing on this scale has ever emerged to my knowledge, not in One Piece YouTubing anyway. It's definitely happened elsewhere on the platform. Now let's discuss some of the negatives. Creating a strong brand of followers is undeniably amazing, but it's also very risky because by association you are creating those non-believers as well, which means that you are naturally restricting your viewer base and potential growth, primarily due to alienating people with an idea that they may not like. And that's fine to do every now and then. Not everyone agrees with all of my videos, that's for sure. But again, mathematically, the raid will fail rhetoric appears on average at least once in every 3 videos. If you don't like that idea, it is going to be so much more difficult than it should be to become a Morj fan in the long run. And furthermore, we have to ask the obvious question of what happens if the raid doesn't fail? What happens if the thing you've built your entire brand around doesn't come to fruition? It's going to be difficult to to recover from that. It very much reminds me of Harold Camping, the guy who famously predicted the rapture of 2011. He did so through an analysis of the Bible and convinced thousands of people around the world. And then when the world didn't end, his followers shrank to around 25 people. And I'm sure that Morj won't experience something that devastating, but again, like, the raid failing is his brand at this point. And the non-believers are never going to forget that. For as long as he talks about One Piece, he'll be known as the raid fail guy, unless he does manage to successfully rebrand. However, and we should acknowledge this, on the flip side, if against all current odds the raid does fail, then Morj will be known as the perseverant hero of One Piece, the guy who never gave up no matter how bad it got. So it's very high risk, high reward. I have to say, if it was me, I don't think I would have tied my brand to the outcome of a fictional story. Again, I don't mean that in a snarky way, but putting yourself out there in such a ride or die way is just so unnecessarily risky. And I really hope that he can break out of it, because as much as I don't personally agree with a lot of his ideas, he does present a different perspective, and that is very valuable to the community as a whole.